In the world of billionaire owners, it's pretty hard to stand out as the, let's go with mercurial one of the bunch. I'm pretty sure that's the nicest way to call someone a jerk, right? After all, it's not like this select group of the world's elites were able to become billionaires by holding hands and singing kumbaya. It seems like each owner has a bigger ego than the next, and they are all jockeying for position in the highly competitive landscape that is the world of professional sports. But every once in a while, an owner comes along and finds a way to raise a bar that seemed impossible to move, and wows the general public with his complete detachment from life as a regular person. For example, there's Jerry Jones, who's been criticized for his unceremonious firings of longtime team personnel. That includes fan favorites like the first head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, Tom Landry. Obviously, when you're investing millions of dollars in a business, you have every right to run it how you see fit, and you can hire and fire whoever you want to work for you. But maybe, just maybe, have a conversation with an employee that has been with the organization for 28 years before you leak his dismissal to the press. I don't know, it seems like common sense to me. For all the heat that Jones has received for his shrewd, at times Ebenezer Scrooge-like antics over the years, he's hardly the worst of the lot. Remember old Jerry Richardson, who ran the show for the Carolina Panthers down in Charlotte, where he strictly enforced Jeans Friday and harassed damn near every female employee in the organization? It's almost as if middling general indecency is a prerequisite for NFL ownership. But if you ask me, Dan Snyder stands alone as the NFL's most petty and generally unlikable owner. At least someone like Jerry Jones has some redeeming qualities about him, with his southern charm and genuine passion for the sports in his franchise. Snyder absolutely takes home the dubious distinction as the NFL's least likable character. And honestly, it doesn't even look like it stops there. Snyder seems tireless in his pursuit of becoming the least likable person in all of sports. Some of Snyder's actions make it seem like he does it all on purpose. It's almost as if Washington's owner actually launched a multifaceted strategy to ensure he remains unlikable. It's hard to find a piece of his business or personal life that hasn't been a public relations disaster. Of course, like every malignant narcissist, Snyder has been sure to surround himself with a collection of sycophants throughout his time in Washington, so that he doesn't have to feel the burning hatred that his fan base seemed to have for him. And perhaps more so to maintain control over pieces of the operation that he should never have his grubby little paws on. Like back in the early 2000s, when he overruled nearly the entire football operations team and brought in free agent quarterback Jeff George to back up Brad Johnson, then became insistent that George, the former #1 overall pick, become the starter. Snyder quickly fired head coach Norv Turner in the middle of the season, no less, when he disagreed, and slid in Terry Robisky, a yes man of epic proportions, who has since admitted that he would play Jeff George over Brad Johnson just because that's what the owner wanted. Mr. Snyder owns the football team, Robisky declared after his first practice as head coach. If I wanted to change my desk, I'm gonna call him and say I want to change my desk. If I want to change quarterbacks, I'm gonna call him and say, what do you think of me changing quarterbacks? It's his football team. Unfortunately, Snyder's transgressions were not limited to meddling with the football team, because as annoying as it may be to have incompetent ownership as a fan, its importance pales in comparison to having an owner that is completely detached from acceptable human behavior. For starters, look no further than the team's name, mascot, and perhaps worst of all, Snyder's ceaseless closed-mindedness when it comes to the issue. And maybe don't go on record saying, we'll never change the name, it's that simple. Never. You can use caps, because then, even if you do end up coming around on the issue, it becomes much harder to backtrack on the whole situation. Because at this point, Snyder has become the face of anti-Native American rhetoric. And there is no denying that Dan Snyder definitely succeeded in making himself appear uncaring and hard-headed in this whole approach to dealing with criticism to the name. Perhaps, if Snyder was just another out-of-touch billionaire who didn't realize he's being insensitive on the issue, we would sort of gloss over his antics like we have done for so many questionable characters in sports history. But Snyder has simply made it impossible to do so by continuing to spread his nastiness all across the greater Washington, D.C. area. I think that among many, Snyder's most toxic trait is his insatiable litigiousness. It seems like the guy can't go 3 months without drumming up some sort of courtroom drama. There was a time he filed a suit against both Washington City Paper and one of its writers, Dave McKenna, who had published a lengthy article titled "The Cranky Redskins Fan's Guide tied to Dan Snyder. The article chronicled the countless controversies and criticisms that Snyder was rightfully embroiled in throughout the years. Although McKenna carefully curated a selection of true stories about Snyder's time in DC as the team's owner, Snyder was incensed by McKenna's decision to put the collection of his actions on display for the whole world to see. Not only did he claim that the article McKenna published was defamatory in nature, but in an irony-soaked rage, Snyder claimed that the illustration on the cover, which detailed a graffitied beard scribbled in devil's horns and a scraggly unibrow, similar to a drawing we have all probably seen in middle school, was an anti-Semitic caricature. Completely oblivious to his hypocrisy, Snyder openly lamented the defaced picture of him and was relentless in his determination to keep the paper up to its eyes in legal fees until it went under. It is unclear why, but thankfully he did drop the charges a few months later. But leave it to Snyder to turn something that every single public figure has to deal with, the media, into a disastrous situation for everyone. Somehow his legal feud with Washington City Paper is far from Snyder's most disgraceful legal battle, as he made suing longtime fans a common practice for the organization. In fact, it's not even close. If you haven't heard the name Pat Hill before, well then buckle up, because this one is ugly. She had purchased season tickets for the first time back in the early 1960s when her daughter was a part of the halftime show at the old DC Stadium, and she never looked back. She had a homemade burgundy and gold rug in the living room and pennants from all the Super Bowls she attended up on the walls. So, what came between Dan Snyder and this adorable Redskins-loving elderly woman? Well, I'm glad you asked. Just a global economic crisis that centered on the real estate industry and crippled the 73-year-old real estate agent financially. Unable to afford her $5,300 a year contract for 2 low seats behind the end zone, Hill reached out to the team and tried to orchestrate a deal that would allow her to pay off her debt as the market recovered. But, of course, they declined to negotiate with a 40-plus year fan and almost immediately initiated legal proceedings. Hill was one of 125 season ticket holders who asked to be released from a multi-year contract and were sued during a 5-year period, which seems absolutely insane. According to General Counsel David Donovan, the lawsuits were a last resort effort that involved a small minority of ticket holders. I don't know, but if you ask me, that sounds about as disingenuous as it gets. Maybe Snyder should have enlisted the services of a public relations firm to help him navigate the situation, instead of just tasking it out to the General Counsel. Although, when you think about it, involving a PR team would insinuate that Snyder actually realized what he was doing was wrong, which honestly, I don't know if he's capable of. There is one controversy, though, that Snyder did end up hiring a public relations specialist for. In fact, he had to put him on retainer, Mike Sitrick of Sitrick & Company. Sitrick & Company is a self-described crisis management firm that specializes in strategic communications, which, if you look at their track record, is true. But this specific firm had a reputation for having a wealthy but morally questionable client base. This is the same company that helped Paris Hilton get out of all her troubles back during her prime party days, as well as the Jackson family and even Jeffrey Epstein. Let's just say that Sitrick & Company doesn't typically include morality in its equation when it's deciding whether or not to take on a project. So what did Mr. Snyder find himself mixed up in this time that he felt that he needed to inquire about such a company? He enlisted the help of a high-ranking National Park Service official because he wanted a better view of the Potomac River from his Montgomery County estate. He used his wealth and influence to access an official that no normal person would have access to negotiate with, and brokered a deal to cut down more than 130 trees on a hillside between his Potomac estate and the C&O Canal. And these were protected trees too. Perhaps the most laughable part of this entire controversy was the $100 fine he received from the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. Yeah, that'll show the billionaire a $100 fine. He also assisted in compromising the anonymity of the whistleblower, and once the park ranger's identity was exposed, he was subjected to extreme harassment, and his involvement subsequently ended his career as a ranger. But what else is to be expected from a snake like Dan Snyder? This is the guy that tried to release special edition 9/11 Pentagon hats and sell them on the team website, with not a single mention of any of the proceeds going to a memorial charity or anything.
You haven't haven't changed at all. You're still evil, and when you're trying to be good, you're even more evil.
Then there was his egregious mistreatment of Washington's cheerleading team, a team that he saw fit to repurpose into his own personal fleet of escorts. There were mandatory team bonding parties on the boats of wealthy financiers, which they felt pressured to go on. And, of course, the bizarre team trip to Costa Rica, which was so distasteful that 5 of the cheerleaders went to the New York Times to explain how worthless and unprotected the team had made them feel. The trip was disguised as a tropical getaway for the cheerleaders to take photos for the team calendar, many of which required them to pose topless or in body paint. And Snyder had no problem of encouraging the all-male group of sponsors and suite holders on the trip to get up close and gawk at them while they were changing and posing. Not to mention the fact that the cheerleaders weren't even paid for their time, as Snyder felt it sufficed to give them travel expenses. Dan Snyder has quite the laundry list of nefarious behaviors, and honestly, I think it's just a matter of time until the NFL gets him out of there. Not only has the team been a laughingstock, but Snyder continues to make his case as one of the biggest scumbags to ever cash his checks from professional football. Simply put, he is absolutely the worst. The worst! But hey, who's your least favorite owner in professional sports? Let us know in the comment section below. If you like this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton, and hey, we do appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea, because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.